Hello everyone, this is Sunny Book. Today, we're gonna read *캡틴언덜팬츠 and the Perilous Plot of Professor Poopy Pants. Then, listen carefully and let's go inside the story. In our last 3 adventures, we tried to save our crazy principal from disaster. He thought he was a real superhero, but he wasn't. We didn't think things could get any worse, but they did. The top secret truth about *Underpants*, all new. Once upon a time, there were 2 cool kids named George and Harold. We are awesome. Me too. They had a mean old principal named Mr. Crop, blah blah blah. Mr. Crop was very mean to George and Harold, blah blah blah. So they bought the 3D hypno ring. They used it to hypnotize Mr. Crop. You will obey us. Okie dokie. But they made a terrible mistake. You are now *Underpants. Haha. Okay. Hey, come back, Mr. Crop. Tra-la-la. Mr. Crop thought he really was *Underpants, but he didn't have any superpowers. Stop, you big dummy. They had a lot of adventures. One time they even got attacked by a UFO. Uh-oh. They all got took into the spaceship, and George stole some alien superpower juice. Then Mr. Crop got eaten by a big evil dandelion. You had to be there, so George gave him some superpower juice. Then he got superpowers. How *Underpants has amazing strength. He can even fly too. Holy cow! The only way George and Harold can stop *Underpants from causing trouble is by pouring water on his head. This makes him turn back into Mr. Crop. Hey, Bob! But beware, because whenever Mr. Crop hears somebody snap their fingers, snap, snap, he turns back into you-know-who. Oh no, here we go again. Tra-la-la. The end. Treehouse Comic, Inc. Chapter 1. George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the left with the tie and the flat top. Harold is the one on the right with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. Jerome Horrett Elementary. Don't underestimate our good teachers. All of the experts at Jerome Horrett Elementary School had their opinions about George and Harold. Their guardians counselor, Mr. Ragtag, said the boys suffered from ADD. The school psychologist, Miss Labler, diagnosed them with ADHD, and their mean old principal, Mr. Crop, thought they were just plain old BAD. But if you ask me, George and Harold simply suffer from IBSS, incredibly boring school syndrome. You see, George and Harold weren't really bad kids. They were actually very bright, good-natured boys. Their only problem was that they were bored in school, so they took it upon themselves to liven things up for everybody. Wasn't that thoughtful of them? Unfortunately, George and Harold's thoughtfulness got them into trouble every now and then. Sometimes it got them into a lot of trouble, and one time it got them into so much trouble it almost caused the entire planet to be taken over by a ruthless, maniacal, mad scientist guy in a giant robot suit. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Jerome Horrett Elementary, our teachers don't use deodorant. Chapter 2. All Hail New Switzerland. As everybody knows, New Switzerland is a small country just southeast of Greenland. You probably know all about New Switzerland's natural resources and systems of government. But here's something about New Switzerland that I'll bet you didn't know. Everybody in New Switzerland has a silly name. Just ask their president, the Honorable Chunkles, Jingleberry McMonkeyburger Jr., or his lovely wife, Stinky. They'll tell you all about New Switzerland's proud silly name heritage. They'll tell you about the cultural significance of silly names. And then they'll probably tell you a really, really long, boring story of how the stupid tradition got started. We'll skip that part, okay? Just remember that everybody in New Switzerland has a silly name. From the richest to the poorest. From the dumbest to the smartest. And speaking of the smartest, let me introduce you to Professor P.P. Poopy Pants. That's a statue of him down there in the bottom right-hand corner of the page. Now, P.P. Poopy Pants was probably the smartest person in all of New Switzerland. He graduated at the head of his class at Chunky Kui Boogernos University, and afterwards spent all of his time creating wild and fantastic inventions. Let's look in on him, shall we? New Switzerland Hall of Fame. Jingle T Chunky Chunks. Tipper Q Zipper Dripper. I Banna Gada D Bap Room. Professor P.P. Poopy Pants. Back in his private laboratory, Professor P.P. Poopy Pants was just putting the finished touches on two wonderful new inventions, the Shrinky Pig 2000 and the Goosey Grower 1000. Professor Poopy Pants called for his assistant, Pork Belly Funky Shunk. Mr. Funky Shunk, Pippi yelled, I am now ready to test my new inventions. Pork Belly took notes while the professor aimed his Shrinky Pig 2000 at the hideous pile of trash. Blizzard! A powerful beam of energy blasted the garbage heap. Suddenly, the large pile of trash shrunk to the size of a gumball. Hooray, works! Cried Professor Poopy Pants. Now I must try the Goosey Grower 1000. Pippi and Pork Belly aimed the Goosey Grower 1000 at an ordinary hot dog with mustard. Blizzard! Went another bright beam of energy. Suddenly, the hot dog grew and grew until it crashed through the walls of the laboratory. We did it! Exclaimed Pork Belly. What do you mean, we? Yelled Professor Poopy Pants. I did it. I'm the genius. You're just a lowly assistant, and don't you forget it. Sorry, boss, said Pork Belly. With these two inventions, exclaimed Professor Poopy Pants, I will be able to solve the world's garbage problem and create enough food for everyone on the entire planet. Finally, it looked as if all of the Earth's dilemmas would be fixed forever, but who would have believed that in just a few short weeks, Professor Poopy Pants would be trying to take over the planet in a fit of frenzied rage? Well, dear readers, the tragic tale is about to unfold, but before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 3. The Field Trip. Durham Hall Elementary School was having its big annual field trip to Piqua Pizza Palace. All of the kids had brought their permission slips and were lined up to get on the bus. George and Harold could hardly wait to eat pizza and play video games all afternoon. This is gonna rule, said George. Yeah, if we were to get there, said Harold. Hey, said George, let's change the letters around on the school sign while we're waiting. Good idea, said Harold. So George and Harold ran over to the sign and began their, thoughtfulness. Unfortunately, the boys didn't notice a dark, foreboding presence lurking nearby in the bushes. Aha! Cried Mr. Crop. I caught you boys red-handed. Uh-oh, said George. Hee, laughed Harold. This is just a little joke. A joke? Yelled Mr. Crop. Do you boys think that's funny? George and Harold thought for a moment. Well, yeah, said George. Don't you? Said Harold. No, I don't think it's funny, yelled Mr. Crab. I think it's rude and obsessive. That's why it's funny, said George. Durham Horrocks Elementary. Please don't part in a diaper. Oh, said Mr. Crab, you boys like to laugh, huh? Well, here's a good one. You two are officially banned from the school field trip. Instead of eating pizza, you spend the afternoon cleaning up the teacher's lounge. Isn't that funny? No way, said Harold. That's not funny at all, said George. That's cruel and unusual punishment. That's why it's funny, Mr. Crab snorted. Chapter 4. Left Behind. Mr. Crab marched George and Harold over to the janitor's closet. You can use these supplies to clean the teacher's lounge, said Mr. Crab. I want it spotless by the time we get back. Mr. Crab went back outside, climbed onto the school bus, and laughed loudly as the buses pulled away. The teachers all pointed at George and Harold and laughed too. Rats, said Harold. I thought we were going to have fun today. We can still have fun, said George. All we need is these letters, that bag of powders, paste, and those big boxes of styrofoam wormy thingies. So George and Harold carried their supplies to the teacher's lounge and got down to business. At the sink, George pulled the sprayer nozzle, while Harold carefully tapped the spray handle in the on position. Then the two boys put the nozzle back, making sure the sprayer head was pointed into right direction. Next, George held the letters steady while Harold climbed up to the ceiling fan. There he began scooping generous amounts of powdered paste onto the tops of the fan blades. Is that right? asked Harold. Yep, said George. Try to get most of it on the ends of the blades. Got it, said Harold. George closed all the blinds while Harold adjusted the ceiling fan so it would turn on when the lights came on. Finally, the boys filled the refrigerator up with worm-shaped styrofoam, packing pallets. This is going to be fun, said Harold. Not for the teachers, laughed George. Chapter 5. The Fun Begins. An hour or so later, the buses returned to the school. All of the children got off, packed up their stuff, and got ready to go home. Mr. Fight, the science teacher, was on school bus duty. The rest of the teachers gathered around George and Harold and began testing them. You kids sure did miss a fun field trip, said Miss Ribble. The pizza was so delicious. Too bad you didn't get any. I wanted to bring you back a pizza, said Mr. Meaner, but I ate it on the bus. He threw an empty pizza box at George and Harold's feet, and the teachers howled with laughter. Maybe you can lick the cheese of the box, Mr. Crab roared. The teachers eventually got tired of tutoring George and Harold, so they retreated to the teacher's lounge to relax. Hey, how comes it's so dark in here? asked Mr. Meaner as he flicked on the lights. The ceiling fan began rotating very slowly. Miss Ribble went to the sink and turned on the faucet. Suddenly the spray nozzle sprayed cold water all over her. Ah! she screamed. Somebody turn the water off. The other teachers sprang off and tried to help. They all got sprayed too. The ceiling fan was rotating faster now, and some of the powder's paste had begun flying off the pan blades. The teachers struggled with the faucet, pushing and shoving each other. Finally, somebody turned the water off, but not before everyone was thoroughly soaked. The ceiling fan was now spinning at full speed. All of the powder on the pan blades had been flung up, and it was now floating down onto the wet teachers. Hey, what the? cried Mr. Meaner. What all this sticky stuff, young Miss Androp? By now, all of the teachers were covered in gooey, sticky paste. It didn't take a genius to know that George and Harold were behind all this. "Those brats better not have touched my diet soda," Miss Ribble shouted. She dashed to the refrigerator and swung the door open. Swish! Suddenly, thousands of tiny styrofoam pellets flew out into the room. The wind from the ceiling fan blew the pellets around and around. Naturally, they landed on the stickiest things in the room, the teachers. "Ah!" screamed the teachers. They ran out of the teachers' lounge screaming and yelling. George and Harold saw what looked like a group of giant evil snowmen heading straight toward them. "I've got a good idea," said George. "What?" asked Harold. "Run!" said George. Chapter 6. Bye-bye, Mr. Fyde. The next day, George and Harold's science teacher, Mr. Fyde, knocked on Mr. Crop's door. "What do you want?" barked Mr. Crop. I've come to resign," said Mr. Fyde. I just can't take it any more." "Now hold on, Bob," said Mr. Crop. "Being a teacher is hard work. You can't just quit your job when things aren't—" "You don't understand," said Mr. Fyde. "I think I'm cracking up." "What do you mean?" asked Mr. Crop. "Well," said Mr. Fyde, "it all started a few months ago when I had this dream that I got eaten up by a talking toilet. Then I started hearing cats and dogs meowing and growling in the classroom. Then I imagined that the school got flooded with sticky green goop, and just yesterday I thought I saw a group of abominable snowmen chasing two boys down the hallway." "Now wait just a minute, Mossy," said Mr. Crop. "All of that can be explained. And a few days ago," said Mr. Fyde, "I thought I saw a big fat bald guy in his underwear fly out the window." "Holy cow," said Mr. Crop. "You are crazy." So Mr. Fyde handed in his resignation and left Jerem Howell Elementary School for the greener pastures of the Fuqua Valley, home for the reality challenge. "Now, where am I going to find a new science teacher on such short notice?" said Mr. Crop. "Where? Oh, where?" Chapter 7. Here, oh here. Remember that poopy pants guy I was telling you about back in Chapter 2? Well, things hadn't been going too well for him in the past several weeks. Professor Poopy Pants had come to America to share the Shrinky Pig 2000 and the Goosey Girl 4000 with the world, but nobody seemed to want to hear about his inventions. They were all too busy laughing at his silly name. Poor Pee-Pee Poopy Pants had been left out of every major scientific institution in the U.S. He'd been giggled out of Georgetown, howled out of Harvard, yuckled out of Yale, snickered out of Stanford, and chuckled out of Chattanooga State Technical Community College. Ha 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 hee hee hee. Professor Poopy Pants was running out of money, and there was no place left for him to turn. Then one day the professor walked into a New York coffee shop and picked up a newspaper. And like a message from heaven, Pee-Pee Poopy Pants found his answer. "That's it!" he cried. "I'll become an elementary school science teacher. I'll work really hard, and soon people will come to respect me and see what a genius I am. Then I can introduce my great inventions to the world." Pee-Pee Poopy Pants was certain that the one place people wouldn't laugh at his name was at an elementary school. "Kids are so accepting and loving," he said. "You can always count on the sweetness and innocence of children." Chapter 8. The Sweetness and Innocence of Children. "Hello, boys and girls," said the professor a week later. "I'm going to be your new science teacher. My name is Professor Pee-Pee Poopy Pants." Alright, settle down, boys and girls. Yes, it's a funny name, I know, but let me explain how I got this name. Please, children, settle down. It's not that funny, let me assure you. Boys and girls, please stop laughing. Alright, I'm going to count to 10, and when I'm done, I want all of you to quiet down so we can learn about the wonderful world of science. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9.5. Children, please stop laughing. I know you're all very far behind in your lessons, and we've got a lot of catching up to do. Boys and girls, stop it. I'm not going to tell you again. It's not funny. There's no reason at all for you to be laughing at my name. I'm sure we all have funny names if you think about it. Stop it right now. Okay, boys and girls, I'll just wait until you all settle down. I can't wait. A week later, things hadn't gotten any better. Professor Poopy Pants was really beginning to get angry. How am I going to get through to these children? He asked himself. Hey, I've got it. I'll create a wonderful new invention. Chapter 9. The Gribble Jogger 2000. The next morning, Professor Poopy Pants came to school with an odd-looking miniature robot. Look, children, he said, I've created a new invention using the principles of science. I call it the Gribble Jogger 2000. The children stopped laughing for the moment and looked with interest at Professor Poopy Pants' new invention. You see, children, said the professor, some people like to jog, and their pets like to jog along beside them. That's fine if you have a dog or a cat, but what if you have a pet gerbil? It used to be a big problem, but not anymore. Professor Poopy Pants opened the glass dome on the Gerbil Jogger 2000 and inserted a cute, fuzzy gerbil. The gerbil pushed his tiny legs against the simple controls, and suddenly the machine came to life. In no time at all, the gerbil was jogging around the classroom in his rubber suit. The children were delighted. Wow, said Connor McCinnick. Science is cool. All of the other kids agreed. This is wonderful, thought the Professor Poopy Pants. I've reached them. Now I can teach them. Excuse me, said George the professor. What's your middle name? My middle name, said the professor proudly, is Pee-Pee. Why do you ask? At that point, the children picked up where they had left off, laughing at Professor Pee-Pee Poopy Pants' ridiculous name. The professor began to shake with anger. Tiny beans in his forehead started growing, and his face turned bright red. I can't take much more of this, the furious professor said through clenched teeth. I think I might blow a fuss if just one more thing happens. Chapter 10. Just one more thing. Soon afterward, in reading class, the children all heard the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. You know, said George, that story gives me an idea. So George and Harold began working on their newest comic book, Captain Underpants and the Pied Piper of Piqua. That afternoon, they snuck into the office and ran up copies of their new adventure to sell on the playground. And everything would have been just fine if one of the third graders hadn't left his copy lying around in the hallway. Chapter 11. Captain Underpants and the Pied Piper of Piqua by George Beard and Harold Hutchins. Captain Underpants and the Pied Piper of Piqua, story by George Beard, pictured by Harold Hutchins. Once upon a time in the city of Piqua, Ohio, there was a science teacher whose name was Pee-Pee Poopy Pants. My middle name is Pee-Pee. Everybody laughed at his funny name. Ha 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 ha. This made Pee-Pee mad. I'll show them. So he built an army of durable Joker 2000s. Ha ha. He put a gerbils in each one. Hey man, but it couldn't make them do any evil stuff. Rats, tap tap. Then he thought of an evil plan. But of course, he made a bunch of little headphones and put them on the gerbils. Soon, Professor Poopypants' army of Gerbil Joker 2000 were off on an evil rampage. They all headed straight for the school. Ha 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 ha. Help! The Gerbil Joker 2000 broke in the cafeteria. They just knocked over some cupcakes and now they're attacking the gym teacher. Quick, somebody save the cupcakes! Professor Poopypants and his evil army rounded of all the children. Follow me, ha ha ha. This looks like a job for Captain Underpants. What seemed to be the problem? I'm taking these kids to be my slaves. And just who do you think you are? I'm Professor Poopypants. Ha 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 ha. Professor Poopypants was really mad. So he pressed a button on his bow tie. And his bow tie transformed him, check check, into chaka chaka, a fush bush giant brum brum, cyborg, chaka chaka, ha 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 ha, uh-oh. They had a big fight, but Captain Underpants was faster than a speeding waistband, zip, more powerful than boxer shorts, ooey, and able to lift tall buildings without getting a wedge, tra-la-la. Professor Poopypants chased our hero to an auto junkyard. I've got you now, waistband warrior. Now I'm gonna crush you. Captain Underpants pressed the button on his utility waistband. Click, and out popped the tiny toilet of truth. Captain Underpants aimed the tiny toilet of truth at Robo Pee-Pee. Flush! I'm rusted! Captain Underpants saved the day, but what about the evil gerbils? They're not evil. Look, Professor Poopypants was controlling them with this. Is it music? No, listen. Babe, I got you, babe. Ah, help! Please, God, make it stop. This will make anybody turn evil. So Captain Underpants destroyed the controller. Tra-la-la! Hallelujah! Hooray for Captain Underpants! The end. Notice, all animal cruelty was simulated. No actual gerbils were forced to listen to Sure. Treehouse Comic, Inc. Chapter 12. Professor P goes crazy. In his entire life, Professor Poopypants had never been as angry as he was at that very moment. As he stood in the hallway, something inside his fragile brain snapped. He began shaking and sweating uncontrollably. Suddenly, a wicked smile stretched across the professor's face. He staggered toward his empty classroom, mumbling to himself and giggling. He had hit rock bottom, and he decided to pull the rest of the planet down with him. PPP Poopypants was going to take over the world. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you, oh, never mind, I'll just tell you that story. Chapter 13. Honey, I shrunk the school. Professor Poopypants opened the storage closet in his classroom and took out the Shrinky Pixie 1000 and the Goosey Grover 1000. He also grabbed the empty Gerbil Joker 2000 and stumbled outside with his inventions. The crazy professor giggled wildly to himself as he aimed the Goosey Grover 1000 at the Gerbil Joker 1000. Gluzzard! Suddenly, the Gerbil Joker 2000 grew 10 storages high. Professor Poopypants began his long climb up the side of the giant Gerbil Joker 2000. It took almost an hour, but eventually he reached the huge glass dome at the top and squeezed his way inside. "Mommy," said a little boy who was walking by with his mother, "a little old man just crawled into a giant robot suit and is about to take over school." "Oh, for heaven's sake," said his mother, "where do you come up with this nonsense? Next you'll be telling me that a giant man in his underwear is fighting the huge robot in the middle of the city." Professor Poopypants was now in control of the colossal Jugger 2000. He reached down with its mighty arm, picked up the Shrinky Pig 2000, and aimed it at the school. Flazerk! Just then, George and Harold looked out the window. "Hey," said George, "isn't that the Jubber robot thingy?" "Yeah," said Harold. "Why is it so big?" "I don't know," said George, "but it's getting bigger by the second." Said Harold. "I don't think it's getting bigger. I think we're getting smaller." Chapter 14. The Perilous Plot. Professor Poopypants reached down and picked up the tiny skull with his giant robotic hand. Everyone screamed in horror. In no time at all, eyewitness newswoman Ingrid Ashley was on the scene. "What do you want from us?" shouted reporter Ashley. "I want a pencil," screamed Professor Poopypants. "A pencil?" asked reporter Ashley. "Here, take mine." She tossed a yellow, too-sharp pencil toward the giant robot. Professor Poopypants reached down with his giant robot arm, picked up the Grossy Growth 4000, and aimed it at the pencil. Glazzard! The pencil grew to the size of a tree trunk, and Professor Poopypants grabbed it. "Follow me," he said. The giant robot led the news crew to the center of downtown Pequot. There he found 3 large white billboards. He put down the Shrinky Pig 1000 and the Grossy Grover 1000 and began writing on the billboards with his giant pencil. Chapter 15. The Name Change Out Chart 2000. Professor Poopypants spent several minutes jotting down a complex code on the 3 giant billboards. George and Harold, along with nearly 1,000 of their fellow shrunken students, watched the mad professor from the terrifying clutch of his giant robotic hand. "What is the crazy guy up to?" asked Mr. Crow from his office window. "I'll tell you," shouted Poopypants. "Everybody on the planet must now change their normal name into silly names using these 3 charts. Anyone who refuses will get shrunk." "How do the charts work?" asked Mr. Crow. "It's easy," said Professor Poopypants. "What's your first name?" I'm not telling," said Mr. Crow. "What is your first name?" shouted Professor Poopypants. All right, said Mr. Crow. "It's, Benny." All of the children giggled. "So, the first letter of your first name is B," said Pee-Pee. "Now look at the first chart and find the letter B." First chart used the first letter of your first name to determine your new first name. A Stinky, B Lumpy, C Buttercup, D Gidget, E Crusty, F Greasy, G Fluffy, H Cheeseball, I Chim Chim, J Poopsie, K Flunky, L Booger, M Pinky, N Zippy, O Goover, P Doofus, Q Slimmy, R Loopy, S Snotty, T Falafel, U Dorky, V Squeezit, W Oprah, X Skipper, Y Dinky, Z Zaza. Mr. Crow looked at the chart. "It says B Lumpy," he whined. "Good," said Professor Poopypants. "Your new first name is Lumpy." All of the children laughed. "Lumpy Crop," moaned Mr. Crow. "I don't want to be called Lumpy Crop. You won't, laughed Professor Poopypants, because you have to change your last name too. Uh-oh, said Mr. Crop. Your last name is Crop, said the professor, which starts with a K and ends with a P. Now find the letter K on the second chart and the letter P on the third chart. Second chart. Use the first letter of your last name to determine the first half of your new last name. A. Diaper. B. Toilet. C. Giggle. D. Bubble. E. Girdle. F. Burp. G. Lizard. H. Waffle. I. Cutty. J. Monkey. K. Potty. L. Liver. M. Banana. N. Rhino. O. Burger. P. Hamster. Q. Toad. R. Gizzard. S. Pizza. T. Doorbell. U. Chicken. V. Pickle. W. Chuckle. X. Tofu. Y. Gorilla. Z. Stinker. Third chart, use the last letter of your last name to determine the second half of your new last name. A. Head. B. Mouth. C. Face. D. Nose. E. Tush. F. Breath. G. Pants. H. Shorts. I. Lips. J. Honker. K. Butt. L. Brain. M. Tushy. N. Chunks. O. Hinny. P. Biscuits. Q. Toes. R. Buns. S. Fanny. T. Sniffer. U. Sprinkles. V. Kisser. W. Squirt. X. Humperdinck. Y. Rains. Z. Juice. Mr. Crab looked at the two charts. It says K. Potty and P. Biscuits. Wonderful, shouted the professor. Your new last name is Potty Biscuits. Oh no, groaned the professor. My new name is Lumpy Potty Biscuits. The children all howled with laughter. Don't laugh too hard, kiddos, said Professor Poopypants. You all have to change your names too, or I'll shrink you again. Well, as you can imagine, nobody wanted to get shrunk twice, so everybody looked at the three charts and figured out their new silly name. Stephanie Yarkov became Snotty Gorilla Breath. Roby Stenberg became Loopy Pizza Pants. And poor little Janet Warwick became Poopsie Chucklebutt. This may be the most horrible moment in all of human history, said the local news reporter to her audience. It seems that everyone on Earth must now change his or her name to avoid getting shrunk. Good luck to you all. This is Chim Chim Diaper Brains reporting for Eyewitness News. Now back to you, Booger. Chapter 16. Fluffy and Cheeseball. This is Fluffy, Toilet Nose, and Cheeseball Waffle Funny. Fluffy is the kid on the left with the tie and the black top. Cheeseball is one on the right with the t-shirt and bad haircut. Remember that now. We've got to do something, cried Fluffy. But what? Said Cheeseball. We're smaller than two mice. What could we possibly do? Let's go find our old friend Cat in the Pants, said Fluffy. So Fluffy and Cheeseball ran to Mr. Potty Biscuit's office and found him cowering under his desk. I can't believe I'm about to do this, said Fluffy, but here goes nothing. Fluffy snapped his fingers. Snap! Suddenly, a strange change came over Lumpy Potty Biscuits. His worried frown quickly turned into a heroic smile. He rose from behind his desk and thrust out his chest. In no time at all, Mr. Potty Biscuits had removed his outer clothing and tied a red captain around his neck. Tra-la-la, sang the hero. Captain Underpants is here. Cool, said Cheeseball, but from now on you have to call yourself Buttercup tricking Fanny. The guy in the derby suit said so. Hey, said Captain Underpants, I don't take orders from anybody. Great, said Fluffy. Now fly out the window and bring back that big machine thingy with the lava lamp on top. Yes, sir, said Captain Underpants. Chapter 17. Captain Underpants to the rescue. Captain Underpants flew down to the ground and grabbed the goosey grove for 1,000. But on his way back up, he was spotted by Professor Poopypants. The evil professor zapped Captain Underpants with a volt of energy from the shrinking pixel 1,000. Blizzard! Suddenly, the waistband whirlwill began to shrink even smaller than before. He flew back to the tiny school carrying an extremely small goosey grove 1,000, and he dropped it into Fluffy's hand. Hey, where's Captain Underpants? Asked Fluffy. I don't know, said Chisel. I think he got shrunk so small that we can't see him anymore. Well, said Fluffy, at least we have this little invention thingy. How's that going to help us? Asked Chisel. I saw Professor Poopypants use it to make the pencil grow really big, said Fluffy. It's our only hope of ever getting back to normal size. I hope it still works, said Chisel. Fluffy and Cheeseball dashed to the school kitchen and climbed up the ladder onto the roof. Maybe if we zap the school with this thing, everybody will grow back to normal size, said Fluffy. Good idea, said Cheeseball. Then we can all run away. Chapter 18. Are you there, God? It's us, Fluffy and Cheeseball. Fluffy pointed the goosey grove 1,000 at the roof of the school and got ready to press the button. But the boys were spotted by Professor Poopypants. Quickly he turned his mighty robotic hand, and Fluffy and Cheeseball slid off the roof. Downward they tumbled through the air. Oh no, shouted Cheeseball. We're doomed. Wait a second, cried Fluffy. Do you have a piece of paper on you? Yeah, screamed Cheeseball. Right here in my pocket. But what good is it gonna do us now? Quick, cried Fluffy. Pulled it into a paper airplane. What kind of paper airplane? Asked Cheeseball. Any kind, screamed Fluffy. Just do it now. Quickly, Cheeseball folded the paper into a goofy-looking glitter. How's this? He screamed. Great, yelled Fluffy. Now hold it steady. Fluffy pointed the tiny goosey grove 1,000 at Cheeseball airplane and he pressed the button. Gluzerk! Suddenly, Cheeseball's airplane grew to an enormous size. Fluffy and Cheeseball flopped down into it, and the paper airplane took off, gliding through the air. Oh man, cried Cheeseball. I can't believe that worked. We're not out of this yet, yelled Fluffy. Chapter 19. The Flight of the Goofy Glitter. Fluffy and Cheeseball had to admit that it was pretty cool flying over the city streets on a paper airplane. They didn't even seem to mind the fact that they were only about an inch tall each. But you can probably imagine the boys' concern when they started heading straight for a wood chipper. Oh no, cried Fluffy. We're gonna get wood chippered to death. Cheeseball couldn't look. He put his hands over his eyes and waited for the inevitable. But suddenly, swoosh! The paper airplane swerved sharply and missed the wood chipper altogether. Hey, cried Fluffy. How did that happen? I don't know, said Cheeseball. I'm not steering this thing. The boys had barely caught their breath when a small dog noticed the airplane and came running after them. Oh no, cried Cheeseball. We're gonna get eaten by a Whitner dog. Fluffy covered his eyes this time. But wouldn't you know it, the airplane swerved sharply outward and out of the range of the little dog altogether. Are you doing that? Asked Cheeseball. Nope, said Fluffy. It must be the wind. Finally, the paper airplane landed in a wet, sticky pile of hot blacktop. Yuck, said Fluffy. What would be worse than getting stuck in a pile of blacktop? Maybe getting crushed by a big steamroller thingy, said Chisball. You sure have an active imagination, said Fluffy. Lie down, said Chisball as he pointed upward. Look. Oh no, screamed Fluffy. We're gonna get steamroller thingied to death. Just then, the boys were yanked up by the backs of their shirts and carried off through the air to safety. Something's got a hold of us, cried Chisball, but I can see what it is. It must be Captain Underpants, said Fluffy. We just can't see him because he's so small. Hey, said Chisball, I'll bet he was steering the airplane out of danger too. Our hero, the boy shouted. Chapter 20. Extra, 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 extra large underpants. Fluffy and Chisball landed safely in an abandoned alley. We've got to enlarge Captain Underpants so he can fight Professor Poopypants, said Fluffy. The fate of the entire planet is in our hands. But how can he enlarge him if we can't even see him? Asked Chisball. Good question, said Fluffy. Wait, said Chisball. I've got an idea. He called out as loud as he could. Captain Underpants, we can't see you, but if you can hear us, fly over and land on my finger. We have a machine that can make you big again. The boys waited a few seconds. Look, Fluffy, said Chisball. There he is, see? He's that little tiny speck on my finger. Now just aim the machine at that little speck, but don't send my finger, okay? Don't worry, said Fluffy. I'm a great shot with this thing. I won't zap your glazerk. Oops, sorry. The good news was that Captain Underpants had grown larger and was now visible. The bad news was, well, let's just say that Chisball was going to have an awful hard time picking his nose with his right hand from now on. Fluffy gave Captain Underpants a few more shots from the Goosey Grove 1000. The waistband warrior grew and grew and grew until he was 10 stories high. Finally, the colossal captain headed toward the preposterous Professor A shutdown was about to begin. The little boy from Chapter 13 happened to be walking by with his mother again. He looked up and saw a giant man in his underwear getting ready to fight a huge robot in the middle of the city. Mommy, said the little boy. What? Asked his mother. Never mind, said the boy. Chapter 21. The incredibly graphic violence chapter in Flip-O-Rama 10. Warning, the following chapter contains scenes that are so intense and horrific. They may not be suitable for viewing by people who can take a joke. If you are easily offended, or if you tend to blame all of society's evils on TV shows and cartoon characters, please run to your nearest supermarket and get a life. They are located in the Get Real section next to the clues. Good luck! Introducing Flip-O-Rama. Throughout the history of great art, there have been many times where artists have defined their own unique styles, creating what is known as a movement. For example, there was a Renaissance movement, the Impressionist movement, and even the pop art movement. Today, many art scholars agree that the early 21st century may go down in history as the Flip-O-Rama movement. Let's enjoy this great art form and marvel at its emerging cultural significance, shall we? Here's how it works. Step 1. Place your left hand inside the dotted line marked left hand here. Hold the book open flat. Step 2. Grasp the right hand page with your right thumb and index finger inside the dotted line marked right thumb here. Step 3. Now quickly flip the right hand page back and forth until the picture appears to be animated. For extra fun, try adding your own sound effects. Flip-O-Rama 1, pages 123 and 125. Remember, flip only page 123. While you're flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 123 and the one on page 125. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated picture. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. Professor Poopy Pants packed a powerful punch. Flip-O-Rama 2, pages 127 and 129. Remember, flip only page 127. While you're flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 127 and the one on page 129. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated pictures. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. For the head button, Hero halted the horror. Flip-O-Rama 3, pages 131 and 133. Remember, flip only page 131. While you're flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 131 and the one on page 133. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated pictures. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. The brief-wearing bandit battled the bionic behemoth. Flip-O-Rama 4, pages 135 and 137. Remember, flip only page 135. While you're flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 135 and the one on page 137. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated picture. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. The waistband warrior won the war. Chapter 22, the 22nd chapter. Professor Poopy Pants had been defeated, and everybody in the school cheered wildly. They were still small, but at least they got their old names back. "I'm sure glad I don't have a silly name anymore," said Mrs. Ribble. "Me too," said Mr. Rected. "Hooray!" cried George. "Let's all give Captain Underpants a big hand." Harold was not amused. "Oops," said George. "Sorry." "That's okay," said Harold. "Just give me that invention things so I can zap us back to normal." Harold held the Goosey Grove 1000 in his giant hand and zapped George and himself, that is, every part of himself except his giant hand. Gluzzard! Suddenly, George and Harold were back to their normal sizes again. "Boys," said George, "we sure have tasted the limits of science today." "Yep," said Harold, "and the limits of our readers' willing suspension to disbelief." Yeah," said George. "That too." George and Harold picked up their tiny school and carried it back to where it belonged. George got ready to zap the school with the Goosey Grove 1000, while Harold prepared to zap Captain Underpants with the Shrinky Pig 2000. "I sure hope this works," said George. "Me too," said Harold. Chapter 23. To make a long story short, it did. Chapter 24. The chapter before the last chapter. George took Captain Underpants over to the bushes behind the school and ordered him to dress back up like Mr. Crop. "Let's go, Bob," said George. "We haven't got all day." Then Harold had some fun with the garden hose. In no time at all, Mr. Crow was back to his old nasty self again. Soon, the cops showed up to arrest Professor Poopy Pants. "There's one thing I don't understand," said George the professor. "Wouldn't it have been smarter to change your own name instead of forcing the rest of the world to change theirs?" "Gosh," said Professor Poopy Pants, "I never thought of that." A few weeks later, George and Harold received a letter from the Pequot State Penitentiary. Chapter 25. The chapter after the chapter before the last chapter. "You know," said George, "I really learned something today." "What's that?" asked Harold. "I learned that it's not nice to make fun of people," said George. "Wow," said Harold. "I think this is the first time one of our stories ever had a moral." "Probably the last time too," said George. "Let's hope so," said Harold. But George and Harold had forgotten all about the other moral they had learned along the way, which was, don't ever, ever, ever hypnotize your principal, because if you do, your life can go from bad to worse. Snap, snap, at the snap of a finger. Oh no, screamed Harold. Here we go again, screamed George. Tra-la-la. The end.